He's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 25 years of experience.
And he's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director, and the author of 2 books on the creative brief. And together, we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing discussion about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising in general. So, Howard, we're back for another episode, and today I think we're going to have a brief discussion, a short discussion about how long a creative brief should be.
Or I think it might be a long discussion on how short a creative brief might be. I think we're still debating what we're going to be talking about here, huh?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So, how long should a creative brief be? Obviously, the
answer is real simple, Henry. 125 words. Are we done?
Let's go. That's it. Time for a beer.
Yeah.
Listen, obviously, there's the cliches about, it's called a brief for a reason, right? We should be striving to keep it as short as possible for a lot of reasons. One is generally that the more you write, the less inspiring it's likely to be. The more you've written, the more likely it is that you don't really know where you're headed, and so you're just kind of throwing stuff on the wall to make it stick, or you've compromised somehow with a client or something to throw things in there that shouldn't be there. I think a good rule of thumb is 1 Microsoft Word page. Although I understand, and even in my own case, there are situations where you have to bleed over onto a second page or even a second full page. And we could talk about those, what those kind of extenuating circumstances are. I have some thoughts on that, but what do you think, Howard?
I like to recall what Oscar Wilde said, and I think he's the one who's gotten the credit for this, but he said something to the effect of, I apologize for writing such a long letter. If I'd had more time, I would have made it shorter. So the idea that a long brief is because you don't know what you're talking about, I think is clearly a smart argument, and I agree with you 100%. But we also have to remember that a brief shouldn't be, and I hope never is, a first draft. So a first draft might be 3 or 4 pages, or even a page and a half. But to get it down to a single page, I think, is the objective. Now we're going to take a look at a brief that we both like as an example of a well-written brief. It was produced by the Richards Group. It's probably 20 years old, and it's for a product called Kiwi Shoe Polish. This is an everyday it's a packaged good, a common packaged good. It's a market leader. But as you look at this brief, it fits into 1 page. It has exactly 127 words, and I know because I counted them. But that doesn't include the questions. And what I love about this brief is that it never asks the question, what is the insight? But every answer on this brief includes some kind of an insight. So it's taken the work that you do as a planner and a strategist, which is research, which we talked about last time, and synthesizes it and crystallizes it down into the essence. It's most reduced, which fits onto a single page. And that's what creatives love. So I'd love to say, 125 words. If you go beyond 125 words, you're in trouble. It's clearly not that simple, but that's actually not a bad guideline. If you can't say what you need to say to inspire your creatives in about 125 words, with exceptions, you're probably going over. That's my thinking.
Yeah. So, and that's where I think there are those exceptions. And so, and some of those might be, and I'm thinking top of mind right now on a brief that I've just completed that I have not yet briefed our creatives with yet, but it's for a new product from a brand that exists, but it's going to be in an all new segment of their industry that they're creating, a segment that they're creating. And it's a product that has a lot of features, and the audience is a new audience for the client. And so this vehicle is a new product and a new segment, and the client has this target segmentation. We have to spend some time telling the story of who this target audience is. So I have about 4 paragraphs of narrative just on who this target is, how they live their everyday life, how they interact with the the product category currently and how we think they might interact with it in, when we introduce our product and they're exposed to it. So there's a lot of storytelling that has to be told there, and a lot of boxes that I need to check off on that I think are all important, right? So you have to be evaluating, like, is this important enough to be in here? And so we've talked about target description and how important it is. And there can be elegant one-line target descriptions, like in this Kiwi brief. But sometimes you have to get into it a little more because of what I said. We have other targets that we target for other products, and we have to talk about how these are different. So that's a byproduct of that. Also in this case, this product is a complex product with a complex purchase cycle, and it has a lot of features and benefits. And since it's new, we got to get all those features and benefits out on the table so that the creatives can kick the tires, if you will, if I'm not giving away too much. And so they need to be oriented to this vehicle they've never seen before because it's top secret, right? So it's really interesting in that regard, that I'm putting more in there than normally I would want to put in, but I'm excusing myself because of the special circumstances.
Well, you said vehicle, and of course you're talking about a bicycle, so we'll leave it at that. But we have to remember that Kiwi is a legacy product that has been a market leader for many, many years. And in your case, and I took a look at this brief, that, when you're trying to introduce something new, it's an entirely different situation. So, my my wish that a brief be no more than 125 words has to come with caveats. When you're doing something new, you need to educate your creatives. You need to educate your entire team. There's a difference between a legacy brand and something that's new. So that has to be a criteria when you're figuring out how long should a brief be. But I think there's a definite correlation between the length of a creative brief and the amount of courage that you see exuded in that brief. It takes courage to reduce the elements of a brief to its essence, to reduce the elements of your product or your service to its most important essence. You can't do that without a little bit of courage, because you're going to upset somebody, and that's the nature of the brief. Yeah, that's my thinking.
A thing that you talked about just now, I think is important, is, when you're talking about reminding people about a product that is already out there in the popular culture, that's different than you're introducing something completely new, right? And the other aspect of that is your audience of creatives. Like, how familiar are they with your, if I'm briefing freelancers, I'm going to go a little more in depth in certain things than if I'm briefing my in-house creators that have been working on the brand for several years. So a good brief writer, briefer, has to take those things into account too, because your audience might be newbies. They might be young creatives that have not worked in the category before. They might have worked on the brand, but in another completely other different vertical, right? So it's I think you need to take those things into consideration also when you're talking about length of brief.
Yeah, and also we have to remember that when we're briefing, because we always talk about the document, but when you're briefing, there are certain things we talk about that don't necessarily show up on the brief itself. Things are out of context. We're not showing all the history of a brand's advertising campaign, but that's clearly important to the creatives. And if they're new creatives, they don't know that. If they're existing team members, they're intimately familiar with that. So we don't need to build that into the brief. That can also help keep it short. So there are a couple of things that we can assume that an experienced creative team already knows. We don't need to put that into the brief.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because there's a difference between a brief and the briefing, right? There are things that you can voice over, things that you might have a mental checklist of things you want to say that aren't in the document, but that will help you, just like giving a speech, right? You have a PowerPoint. You don't want to read from the PowerPoint. You want to tell a story, and the PowerPoint is supporting that story somehow. So I think that the delivery of the brief in a briefing, and that could be a topic for another episode, is important as well, and can help you keep that brief shorter, because there's going to be a conversation.
Well, I'd say that was a pretty short conversation on how long a creative brief should be. What do you think, Henry?
I think it couldn't have been any longer.
The long and short. Thanks, Henry.
Thank you, Howard.
All right, Henry, today for our creative review, we're going to look at some outdoor for Orange County Animal Services, which was put together by Outfront Studios. These are a series of 4 billboards. We'll look at them as we have our discussion. What is your initial take on the creative that you see here?
Yeah, I think there might actually be 6, but we'll put them up however many it is. First, interestingly, Outfront Studios looks like it is the in-house design arm of the media vendor, Outfront out-of-home media vendor. Really nice work here, and you sent me this link, and I thought it would be really interesting to talk about it because I'm actually in the middle of reading this book. It was recommended by a colleague. I'm surprised I'd never seen it before. It's called Damn Good Advice by George Lois, who's a very famous creative director, and he's got a lot of his work is in here, and he has like these short little anecdotes, and he describes the work. And one of the things that he talks about a lot in here is about the combination of visual and words, that the best ideas are visual ideas, but by that he doesn't mean just a photograph or an image, but the interplay of a slogan, a headline, a phrase with a visual. And I think that this work here is a good example because the pictures of the pets are adorable in and of themselves, right? So they're kind of eye-catching. But then it's the interplay of the word, right, of the phrase there in which the blanks are the word pet, right? That really makes it kind of clever, makes it sticky in your mind, and you think, oh, that's cute. Like, so the animal is cute, the idea is cute, and so, you know, it's not a heavy lift for the consumer when they're driving by and they see this cute dog and they see this message from the Orange County Animal Services. So I think it's really elegant in its simplicity, and it is an exact example of what George Lois talks about in terms of thinking visually, and that the most powerful ideas are visual, but not strictly just an image. They're the interplay between words and imagery.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I love this campaign myself. What really excited me about this is a slightly different take from what you've discussed, and that is this trusts the audience. There's 3 little letters stuck in the middle. It's not a difficult quiz. It's not going to try your intelligence, but it trusts the audience to figure it out. You know, it goes back to David Ogilvy's famous line, never underestimate the intelligence of your audience. I had a creative director who told me, draw the circle, but don't complete it, and trust your audience to complete it for themselves. That's what I love about this. It is that beautiful, fun, joyous image of the pets with a clever headline that's not finished. That to me as a creative is a perfect combination. I
think that phrase about draw the circle but don't complete it is brilliant, because so many practitioners, unfortunately, clients, they're intent on finishing the circle. They don't trust the audience,
right?
And kind of being in on it. And you know, this isn't, again, it's not a heavy lift to complete the circle here for consumers,
right?
But you could imagine a client saying, well, can we handwrite it in the word pet there so that you know, you could envision some clients coming up with something like that. I think that it's generally a good rule to let the consumer finish that circle, because that gives them ownership in a certain way, and makes them more connected with the communication. When you do something with a wink and a nod and they get it, it usually bodes well for the ad.
Absolutely. All right. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time.
Next time. See you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.